The African American Legend series highlights the accomplishments of blacks in areas as varied as politics, sports, aviation, business, drama, literature, and art. We will explore how African Americans have succeeded in areas where they've been previously excluded because of segregation, racism, and lack of opportunity. I'm your host, Dr. Roscoe C. Brown, Jr., and with us today is Voza Rivers, the executive producer of the New Heritage Theater. Greetings, Voza.
Greetings to you also and to your viewers.
Okay, you are an artistic entrepreneur. Tell us what's happening in the Harlem arts community at this present time.
Well, the other hat that I wear is I'm the chairman of the Harlem Arts Alliance, and it's a 400-plus cultural service organization. We meet the first Monday of every month at the theater at Riverside Church, and at that meeting, over 250 of our members attend. What that means for me is that we hear issues, challenges, success stories of what is happening in the community. What we have done is starting October 1st through the 7th, we have claimed it Harlem Arts Advocacy Week, where we're going to take on some of these issues that are impacting on the arts. Everything from politics, of course with the elections and the city council with term limits, possibly the cuts in funding, the housing crisis in our communities, and most importantly now, the collapse of the financial institutions who've been helpful to the arts. So that's one area of concern for what we call the arts practitioners, how we're going to survive in this new environment.
Now you're going to discuss it.
Yes.
Now, hopefully you get some solutions.
Yes.
Because
yes,
those issues that you talked about, politics and financial community support, are not simple. There are no simple answers. It's a very complex process. But what this really is an awareness raising
yes.
situation.
Yes.
Getting people to understand what's going on. For example, you said politics. There are two levels of politics. One is using arts to express political positions.
Yes.
And the other is using politics to get more funding for the arts.
That's right.
Which of those are you going to focus on, or both?
I think it really has to be both. In this instance, for example, city council, there are 51 city council members. There are 39 of them leaving this year, next year. A lot of our arts institutions get discretionary funding through elected officials. The Department of Cultural Affairs is a city agency, and they're due to have major cuts, just like the New York State Council of the Arts. So it is to help through our electoral process, meaning our elected officials with the discretionary dollars, who could kind of make up for what those cuts are going to be. And without the arts organizations having an awareness and an understanding of that process, it puts them at a disadvantage, because the more sophisticated we make our arts institutions and our artists, the better able they can position themselves for creating strategies that will keep them in the game.
Well, see, you're making a good case for what people call pork. They say that this discretionary funding goes beyond the legislative process. Ideally, the legislative process should provide adequate money for arts and creative activities. At the same time, there's competition for education and for health care and housing. Now, how do you make the case that arts deserve an equal role with education, housing, and health care when you're advocating for more support for the arts?
I think the issue of arts being elevated to the same level of priorities in communities of color and communities in the city is a very tough case. It's a tough case. It's a needed and necessary objective to have parity with housing and employment, education. However, in terms of the dispersal of those dollars, the powers that be have put arts at the bottom rung. And they put it at the bottom rung, but it doesn't mean that they don't have to pay attention to it, because through every strand of what we consider our priorities, arts is that ingredient, that mix that makes all of it work. And so a community without its arts, a people without its arts and culture, we could become a lost community. Harlem and the Harlems of the world, the arts have really played a major part in sharing our culture, breaking down barriers of misunderstanding. There is this camaraderie that takes place through the arts, and sometimes we can't do it over other issues, but the arts can break down those barriers, and so it's really an important tool.
Well, actually, arts can be used to help increase awareness about healthcare issues,
yes,
about education issues. In the final analysis, arts is about quality of life.
Yes.
It's just like the programs to eliminate graffiti from walls and trains and so on. That is a quality of life issue.
Yes.
And eventually, when people see that you really are concerned about that quality of life, they will perform better. They will be a little bit more aggressive in taking care of their children, taking care of the community, picking up their trash. So there is a question of quality of life. But then the question is, what clout does the artistic community have with the political and the corporate community in raising these funds?
Well, when we look at the communities throughout the city, most of the smaller arts institutions, their major priority is how do we sustain, how do we keep our doors open, how do we continue to do what we do. The effort to change the dynamic to include a focus on coming together as a collective, so that in numbers there's strength to articulate what these concerns are, is real key. But by and large, our history as artists has been that we work on our own individual institutions or initiatives. And I think one of the most important challenges for us now to address the issues of what's happening with the economy is that the arts organizations must work together. And that's what a core group of us have been doing over the last several years, is to do collaborations. In some instances, a funder will say, you have a really great project, we can only give you X number of dollars. The organization has X and it needs another pot. And it is now our direction that two arts organizations come together, two theater companies, two dance companies, and then let's leverage our individual resources. But as a collaborative, we can share in the graphic designers, we can share in the postage that goes out there, other ways that we can come together to leverage our resources. And this is something that takes a minute to develop because we've been so accustomed to working alone.
Now, when you talk about art, you're talking about theater, you're talking about
the performing and the visual arts.
You're talking about dance, you're talking about
yes.
music. You're talking about the visual arts as well?
Yes, we are. We are. Our membership of the Harlem Arts Alliance, and there are other cultural service organizations, and we really cover all of the arts. So there are media arts also, which deals with the videos, the filmmakers, the technicians, the choreographers, all the behind-the-scene personnel. It's top to bottom, performing and visual and media arts all combined.
Well, how do you get those organizations to work together? Because a dance organization working with a media organization, working with a theater organization, might have a little strain.
Well, when we look at the creation of a work, a body of work, let's say that someone's interested in doing a piece by Zora Neale Hurston that she had written as a play, and there is a group, a dance company that is a member of our organization. So we have a theater company that wants to do a play. We have a dance company. We would put them together and say, can you collaborate and create choreography for this play that we're doing? And then we could also extend it to one of our musical composers to underscore music. So when you start, you could start out as a straight production, a straight play, but because we're all sitting at the table and everyone says, oh, you're going to do a Zora Neale Hurston piece. This is very interesting. You know, our dance company has been studying her body of work. And can we collaborate? We look for those opportunities. And it's only done by example. And I think you're going to see more of it. And I know that I've been at the forefront of doing those kind of collaborations for many years. This is my 44th year producing. And believe me, I could not do it without the collaborations.
Talking about productions, you talked about funding and the politicians and the banks and so on. What about audience? What do you do about audience development? What about the audiences in the city, in the Harlem community, in the Bed-Stuys, the Bronxes of the world? What do you do about audience development? Because that really is a key, because when if I'm a banker and you were coming to me and said, well, what's your audience? If the audience is 100, that's one thing, but if the audience is 5,000, that's another. What do you do about audience development?
I think each venue has its own particular characteristics. There are theater companies that know that they can't get audiences of more than 100 people. And there are institutions that will fund that initiative. And it's the responsibility of that producing entity to make sure that if they do 4 or 5 performances a week at 100, and that means the total capacity is 500, that they shoot to get 70, 80% of that audience for that particular week. There are other institutions that are larger, and funders want to look at that institution. They're not interested in the smaller institution because they're interested in having their brand, their logo, to reach a wider audience as possible. And they're now going to look at institutions who can meet those, who can meet those objectives. So there's a different scale of audience participation. But what's central to all of it is that the producing entity must have a core audience, and they have to sustain that audience with creative ways. For my example is that the majority of the events that I do are free. Okay, this complimentary admission. So people come in, I could be at a 500-seat theater, it's complimentary, but it's not free. What we do is that we ask for an offering based on the fact that we know that once you see what we do, as opposed to getting that $20, that would be a normal admission, a person may say, oh my God, I can't believe that I saw this, I'll write a check for $100. Someone else who can't afford it, they just can't afford it. It might be a donation when they walk out of $3 or $4. But when you leverage it out, what we've found is that we've done better, but most importantly, we've exposed an audience at the maximum level, because then it's standing room only for every event that we do. And so we've cultivated an audience not only in one institution, but all of them. So we'll go and play the 100-seaters as well as the 2,000-seaters and fill up every institution that we perform in.
Well, everybody knows that Voza Rivers puts on great productions, but how would I, or a member of the audience, find out about these other organizations? Is it in the newspaper? Is it on a flyer? How do you find out? Because public relations is a major part of getting an audience.
I agree, and that's why I want to go back to the core groups. We have a lot of small institutions, and they, with their meager funding, a lot of them concentrate on programmatic issues as opposed to audience development and marketing. So you will not find in the local papers ads about what they're doing because they don't have the budget. to do that. That means they have to go back to the old system of word of mouth advertising, passing out flyers at different events, and also using the internet. And some are very successful at the internet aspect, so they feel, oh my God, let's reach our core audience by going to the internet to do that. And that's a new way that they are also maintaining their audiences. But if you're talking about the other kinds of ways, which is advertising, a lot of us, meaning the real small groups, aren't able to advertise.
What about critical reviews of their work? There are papers in the African American and other communities that do many reviews of art shows, dance concerts, and so on. How does that work?
In most of the ethnic publications, there's only one person that can do the reviews, and right now, knowing that kind of information, if there are 4 ethnic publications and there are over 300 organizations that are doing events and activities, it's extremely difficult. And most of the ethnic publications have a very, very small staff to deal with arts and culture, because the advertisers, where they make their money, are in the other sections and not in arts and culture. So arts and culture is a necessary component of the index of a paper. However, it's always the smallest section, and when you look at all of the other sections of the paper.
However, you have this coordinating council.
Yes.
Couldn't the coordinating council work out a way of having one major page where they indicate that what's going on in the community?
Well, we are in negotiations now to do exactly what you've described. In fact, the first arts supplement will come out next month, October. And we have another art supplement coming out in November, and we are involved with a magazine to do the same. So yes, we are taking on that issue. But right now, if you ask me about it today, it doesn't exist. But we definitely are working on an arts calendar that that various papers will print.
Now, suppose someone in the audience is excited about this. How would they get in touch with the Harlem Council of the Arts?
Yeah, the Harlem Arts Alliance. The phone number is 212-410-0030, extension 212. The website is www.harlemaa.org, and we have a very active calendar that's on our website, so that you could go month by month and also get information about a lot of the groups that are in our community. It's not only Harlem. Harlem is a central location, but our members come from all over the city. But our primary focus when we started was to galvanize the arts community in Harlem.
Okay, we've been talking about the business aspect, the fundraising aspect, the political aspect. Let's talk about the content aspect.
Yes.
What are the main themes in African American theater, art, drama at this point in time?
I think that there's always a role for retrospectives and historical figures. Right now, there is a drama with music at the National Black Theater based on the life of Hattie McDaniels, the first African American to win an Oscar for her role in Gone with the Wind. And it's a wonderful production that gives us the historical environment that existed back then and what she went through, which is a story that you don't hear. I know that last year Woody King and the National, the New Federal Theater did a series of pieces. We did something on Stephen Fetchit. We did a Zora Neale Hurston piece, and again, those are those kind of historical figures and retrospectives. There are revivals that theaters are doing, and there's a whole body of new emerging work. So we see emerging work by established and new writers. And these writing programs, the Frank Silvera's Writers Program, the Frederick Douglass Creative Arts Center, these are writing programs, and every week they read new scripts. For me, I received, I would say I receive about 50 scripts a year to consider for a reading series that I do at the Museum of the City of New York once a month. It's people are really quite creative. Musicals are a little harder because it costs much more to do. And in that regard, I see more of the established groups doing the musicals. But there is no dearth of good material to feed the pipeline.
Well, that's true, but, and this is true in theater generally, retrospectives and revivals tend to attract people.
Yes.
What about plays and musicals and dramas that tackle the major social problems of today? Back in the 60s and 70s and the early 80s, black theater was really about challenging the establishment. About what's happening, what should be happening. Now we have more plays that deal with psychic things or introspective things with families and so on. We're not challenging the system as much as we used to in the arts.
Because the difference between the 60s and 70s and even the 80s and now is that we're in a mediated society where protesting and information. There are other vehicles now for doing it, and so with the diminishing funds that a lot of the theaters have, and where they're fighting for audiences are so mediated about issues that now when they come into a space, they want to be entertained. They want to be distracted. They don't want to be hit over the head. When we were in the 60s, we were all energized, in the 70s, and we wanted to tear down the system. Right now, there's a survival mode and there's a need to escape. And so there is an interesting way to balance that. And what happens is, because I was toying with the idea of, I had a very successful production called Sarafina, and it dealt with apartheid and young kids, and I said, should I bring that back? Because everyone's saying, Voza, it's been almost 20 years, and there's a new generation, and they want to see something like that so they can be energized. And I'm really struggling with what I know, what it costs to do, and where that audience is now is a different audience. My audience is different now. So there are all of these things I have to do, focusing on it with a group of people to find out before I just jump in and do it.
Well, this is the classical dilemma of the arts going back hundreds of years. Yes. Arts being the entertainment for the rich, the opiate of the masses, as against arts opening the door for the masses to challenge the establishment.
Yes.
And we've seen this in the media in general. It would seem that part of this is age-related.
Yes.
That many of us came up in those days where we were challenging, and now we're looking at other things.
And we were making history at the same time.
And we need to energize the young people. What are you doing? What is being done to energize some of these younger writers, dancers, musicians, etc.?
Well, I am very pleased to say that that New Heritage Theater Group, which is the oldest black not-for-profit theater in New York City, and I'm a co-founding member. We're 44 years old. That Jamal Joseph and I, 10 years ago, created a youth division, and we created something called Impact Repertory Theater. Our young people are artivists. We combine activism with artists, and they have taken on all sorts of the political issues that exist today, and they have created original material in song and dance and theatrical performances. They have they now are armed with high definition cameras, and they've created videos. We were selected this year for an Oscar for Best Song in a film. We performed on the Oscars, which was shown in 200 countries. 1 billion people saw these young kids from Harlem. That's another step. I feel that if I step down today, I know that the foundation is already laid. The young people who were with us 10 years ago, who were 12 and 13, they're running the program. We do 60 to 70 shows a year. They are one of the most requested performing groups, and they are taking on issues that are intergenerational. They're taking on politics. They're taking on teen pregnancy, suicide. They're taking on unemployment, housing issues, but they do it in such a creative way, and the material is always intergenerational.
Now, suppose someone in the audience wants to get this group to participate or perform for them. How do they do that?
Again, it's Impact Repertory Theater. They're based in Harlem. The phone number is 212-926-4516. Beatrice Bolden, Bolden, is the coordinator. She was with us 10 years ago, and now she runs the program. We're very, very happy with that program, and we tout that as an example of what a lot of our cultural institutions who've been around. Where's the legacy? Who's following us? And when do you start sharing the history? Because I don't want to forget. I don't want the benefits of the struggles of our grandparents and great-grandparents to be forgotten. Our culture is not disposable. And this kind of mediated society where a lot of our young people are living off of sound bites, where when we go into a room to have a conversation, as opposed to looking me in the eye, they're looking down because they have their handheld devices and they're texting people somewhere else. And that's that lack of attention that I feel is disrespectful, but they feel that this is what they need to do.
Well, that's your purpose. And today on African American Legends, we've been talking about Voza Rivers, the executive director of the New Heritage Theater and the coordinator of the Harlem Arts Alliance. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Roscoe.